All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad you made it. We'll see how consistent I can be with maybe Friday night or Saturday daytime recordings, especially since the weather has improved a little bit in my region, meaning that it's not too hot to sit in the car in the daytime. And we're getting some cloudier days, more overcast. We might have our last beach day. I went to the beach last Friday. We might have our last beach day of this year, this Sunday, because it might be up to 80 degree weather. Thank you, sunny Southern California, for, blessing us with beach days in late November, beach days on Thanksgiving week. But so let's talk about something that, I'm not, I'll decide if I'm going to actually jump into something biblical here, as far as like the actual text, but there's some thoughts that kind of come up, when I'm looking at, topics about the Bible. And the interesting thing about it, though, too, is that when you look up a lot of topics about the Bible, the one I want to talk about today is about the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. I want to talk about these, these concepts, this part of, that some people believe that is part of our human history. Other people believe it's some kind of myth. Other people believe it's some sort of interpretation or a theory or some kind of something, but regardless of what you believe or what you've heard, I kind of want to just talk about them as concepts, because it's something that I've never really looked too much at. It's just something that, I would read about it and it would come up and I glance over it like, oh, sucks that they ate the fruit from that. That sucks. And then, looking at the common things that people say is like blaming Eve, or, I mean, I've said that before too, kind of partially joking and then also partially just with frustrations of life. If that is kind of one of the methods that contributed to human suffering, if the Garden of Eden was perfect and people were in it, or Adam and Eve were in it, and then one of them ate from the tree and then the other one ate from I guess Eve technically gave Adam the fruit, so he ate it from her. But I just find it interesting, right? So a lot of times when you think about topics like this, like about the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, a lot of times it is attached to like the Bible story, but you find this in other cultural beliefs too, and that's something that's interesting to look up, which is something I love doing, is looking at, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, looking at different concepts that are around it, right? Like the serpent versus the snake versus the Garden of Eden and those two trees and Adam and Eve. And there's a lot attached, to these stories where it's like you can delve into the histories in multiple cultures of, okay, how do other cultures believe that, or how does this one culture or this part of the world talk about, why evil exists or how it began, how human suffering, began. You can even look at philosophers and their ideas about this. So I don't even want to mention it because I'm gonna butcher it because I can't remember off the top of my head who the main people were that I used to study in college that were talking about like human suffering kind of topics, or like if God is, just, or things like that. I don't know. I would want to say Hume, but I don't know. I could easily just Google it, but I'm not going to right now because I'll go way far off topic. You guys know me. Like one of my favorite, philosophers was Kierkegaard. I'm a Kierkegaard fan. I don't often talk about philosophy. I like philosophy because of the challenging nature of it, of the field. I like challenging things, not to a point to say I'm right or I found something more right or better. Like, I'll do that for my own personal self, for my own personal development, to kind of like reveal for myself kind of more and more what I kind of feel like I naturally align to. But I do leave room for other interpretations, other cultures, and other, theories to be correct, not just me. Because I'm limited as just one person, and I'm going to be biased as just one person coming from my own view of thought. And I wasn't there. I'm not an eyewitness, who knows? This could all be just a simulation. What do I know, But I know what I do believe, what I do feel like I align with, which isn't something that I necessarily feel that I need to really share. I'm comfortable sharing about my background. I'm not comfortable sharing about what I actually do believe. Unless you're a pretty close friend of mine, you're probably not going to be along that part of the journey with me. Just mainly because, if I were to say, oh, I'm atheist, or oh, I'm Muslim, or oh, I'm Buddhist, there are a lot of people who wouldn't want to be open towards anything that I might have to say. And I try not to let my own personal beliefs cloud the way that I'm able to look at things, just because, I like to look at them as if I don't have the beliefs that I have. I like doing that because it, for me, it brings value to my life. Like, not, and again, I'm not trying to challenge things because I hate it or anything, or because I'm bitter. I would say that I did go through a time period in my life where I was bitter about kind of how I was raised and how I was taught about things. And, the environments I was in that weren't really healthy because of, different parts of my culture. And I would say that I hope that the stuff I share doesn't come from that kind of a place. I do often stick, though, to things that I'm more familiar with, mostly in the interest of time and mostly in the interest of, like, it's hard for me to talk a lot about something I've never heard before, ever, without having studied it, or not having any knowledge or even recent knowledge or background in it. And then, like, because my ideas will very likely change from that time. They're going to keep changing and changing and changing. That's just how I kind of am with things. Like, I don't really like to, like, changing as in not like, oh, I believe this one day, then I don't the next, then I do the next, then I don't the next. Like, not like that, but more like, I like to develop ideas more, and, expand on them more to see kind of what I do or don't believe. So, yeah, with the tree of life. Now, I find that interesting because it seems like there's not really much mentioned about this tree. Like the location of the garden, like a lot of people speculate about, the rivers that are kind of mentioned, or the bodies of water that are kind of mentioned to like intersect with one another. That's kind of where it was, that the garden was. So I don't know, how a person could prove that or not. And something else I find very interesting about origin stories, none of us were there, right? None of us were there. But I believe every culture has an origin story. I can't think of any cultures where people created themselves. It may, like, there are cultures where things kind of came from something and then developed into people or formed into people or something along those lines. But I can't think of a culture that believes that, humans formed humans. There's always some other kind of form of thing that the humans came from. But that could be a whole topic in itself. But when you look at the trees, I feel like the tree of knowledge of good and evil gets far more focus than the tree of life. And that's interesting, that, even when you look at the Bible itself and a lot of religions, a lot of the time it's kind of these concepts about how to be happy, how to live while you're on this earth, kind of what things looked like before you got here and what they're supposed to look like once you die. But a lot of times different cultures might not talk, especially in the Bible, they don't really talk too much about, okay, what about the life part? What about the part of humans that, thrives and lives? Instead, there's so much focus on like what you do wrong and what you're not supposed to be doing and what to be aware of, and histories of kind of like different key people in history that existed. That's also something that's very interesting in religious cultures, is that you often see people who were historical, actual individuals. And that's something that makes it interesting, because it's like, okay, these people actually did exist. They were there. People wouldn't like say, it's interesting that people wouldn't say about like, I don't know, like David in the Bible, King David in the Bible, that like he didn't exist ever in history. Like that's not true. Even people who are a different religion, Buddhists can believe that David existed in history, which is kind of interesting. It's like you might not believe the Bible, but you can believe that these people existed in history. Not every single one of them, but there are people that like, yeah, we've verified that they existed or something, even though none of us were there, right? And then there's other concepts that we challenge and we think, this is weird. Was there even a Garden of Eden? Was there even a serpent? Was God even there? Did he even make Adam and Eve? But then it's like, we can say David existed, We can question if Adam and Eve existed, but we can say David existed. And so that's something that's interesting too. Humans often need so much physical type of proof too, to look at something and find like a kind of a proof, right? We look at something and we find just like some kind of a something that we can verify, and we say, yeah, that's accurate, that is true, this person existed. But then we can look at things that are like, that's kind of supernatural. And I don't know, this might just be leading to a whole different topic, but I mean, you can say, okay, something supernatural, and you would consider the trees in the Garden of Eden on the more supernatural side, as well as God being there and a serpent that was talking and things like that. That seems supernatural, right? because it's something weird. I've never seen it. Nobody I know has ever talked about taking a vacation to the Garden of Eden. None of us have seen these trees. There's different people who are professionals that, as long as we've known, nobody's been able to prove that they exist. But then there's other stuff that is like, yeah, the Tigris, the Euphrates, they exist, so it's kind of like, all right, that's interesting that there's certain stuff that we would just challenge, and I wonder why, we do that. I mean, I do that too. I just wonder where that comes from, because there's some other stuff that it seems like, okay, if these people were written about in the Bible, like, did Cain and Abel exist? Did Noah exist? Did Adam and Eve exist? People would say, I don't know. But when you ask, did David exist? Did Saul exist? Did Samuel exist? Did Jesus exist? Did, Judas and Paul and, Andrew and Silas or was Andrew Silas? I don't remember. Sorry. All these people, James, Mary, these people existed. Are the stories attached to them accurate? I mean, that's where people kind of start challenging things, right? But then also you look at today, right? You look at today. I mean, you can look at things like how people say, okay, like science, or okay, like, and I love science. I mean, I studied science. I mean, basically that, science is what I love to do for fun. Even, like, I'm all about statistics and all that kind of thing. Like, I am not knocking science. I'm just saying how we're more likely to believe something written in a journal article or in a textbook than we are to believe something written in a Bible. That's an interesting thing, because basically they're using different methods of teaching about something, right? So the Bible uses different methods, different storytelling, different types of writing or oral tradition, things like that, to explain what it is, where it comes from. So the Bible does that. Scientific articles begin with, a theoretical and, like, process that everyone kind of now follows. Now, this process was developed by humans as a way that was kind of more regimented of a method to get to a place where you can technically prove something, or there's more likely proof to these statistics that we're giving you based on what we are saying, right? But anyone who studies statistics knows that depending what you're talking about, depending what you're studying, and how concrete it is, you can actually skew scientific data and results. And sometimes you'll hear them even on TV, like 1 in 2 dentists recommend, this Crest toothpaste or whatever it may be. And it's like, we believe it. We're like, okay, like half the dentists like it, so that should make me want to buy it. But they don't tell you, did they only ask 2 dentists and one said yes and the other said no? I mean, like, we don't know all the details of all the research, right? But it could be something as simple as that, and then they're still not lying. It could be coming from another place, like, but, we're more likely to believe certain things, right? So that's something that I like to take into account, is just what it is that makes me believe or disbelieve kind of different concepts and ideas when I'm studying them. Because then I go into them and I'm like, the tree and the garden and serpent and God and all these kind of things. And it's like, okay, like some of this I can say that I would probably believe, and others of it I would already start questioning, right? But what makes me question something versus not question something is a whole thing in itself, right? So, that's always something interesting that's going to come up, I think, for all of us, is why we believe something the way that we do. And so if I'm talking about the trees and things like that, like, people who don't believe in the Bible, who don't believe in the Garden of Eden, who don't believe in God, who don't believe in those trees ever existing, it's like, well, these topics wouldn't really maybe appeal to them or be something they'd want to listen to. But it is very interesting. It's interesting, like I was saying, that the tree of life doesn't get spoken about too often. We really focus pretty much from the point, basically the whole Bible after the point of, Eve eating from, well, the Bible basically takes the point from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Once humans were interacting with that serpent and interacting with that tree, everything kind of went downhill from there, right? But the story about the beginning before that, before that any of those events related happened, was just interesting. So, and I kind of like how it's divided up. It's like, they talk about, the Bible talks about the creation and the 7 days or the 6 days, and then there's like a 7-day week, and then all of a sudden, it's like it just bumps into like this information about these trees, and or about the serpent. The serpent was more cunning than any other or something like that. It's like, okay, we're just gonna start now to talk about this serpent. And so they just started to discuss the serpent all of a sudden. And you don't really see the serpent come up again. Like, the serpent, people say is Lucifer, people say is Satan. I mean, that's a very Christian kind of thing, way of thinking. I found out later on that Jews don't really believe that those are all the same individual. Which is very interesting because the Bible was originally written by Jews. So that would assume that maybe Jesus didn't believe that either, because Jesus was Jewish in a time period. But I don't know. I can't say what Jesus actually believed, because it sounds like he was there to challenge in the first place. And so he was there on earth and challenging things, and so that implies that there was some kind of at least some form of, somewhere along the line things weren't going correctly. So, and this happens multiple times in the Bible where it's like things aren't going right, something is gonna need to happen. It's like but it's kind of interesting when you don't hear much too about like other things that made like such a big impact. Like the tree of life is such a big concept, and the serpent, it's such a big concept. But like, like you would think, other than the curse upon the serpent, you don't really hear about this serpent ever coming back again. You do see images of like snakes and things like that. You don't really hear about this specific serpent. So it's kind of like, okay. And you do hear some more about Adam and Eve, and you do hear some more about their who begot who and who begot who, all the way pretty much up to like Noah, and then everything gets wiped out again. And so, that is already that's a short story already. Like, I don't think we even break out of Genesis before the world's already been wiped out the first time around. It's like, didn't we just get here and now we're gonna get wiped out again? So it's kind of just interesting to think about that kind of stuff. For me anyways, it's interesting. I like it. I am very entertained and loving of hearing about this kind of stuff. It really, really, really is enjoyable for me. I know I drive people crazy with all this kind of stuff. Nobody really cares, but I like it. It's fun. I find it relaxing to kind of think about things that are like so much bigger than I am. About like the future of humanity and like the beginning of humanity and like what Earth looked like and how it got here and how we got here and like what else could potentially be out there and what's influencing this or that and who makes the rules of this life and things like that. versus like, oh shoot, I lost my wallet. It's like I didn't, thank God, but I mean, or oh shoot, I locked my keys in the car, or something like that, which is something I did recently. But yeah, guys, I just think it's interesting. I like studying the way I think. I know that might sound weird, but I do. It's pleasant for me to get out of my mind, out of the things that I think kind of matter, and start looking at different ideas. I mean, I often wonder, and I don't have a lot of time to really like sit and delve in, or sit with my thoughts during every day. Like, I feel like the amount of time I usually would need to kind of sit with things and kind of work through things and challenge on things, I don't really get that because I'm working 40 hours and I'm kind of like exhausted a lot of the time too. Not too much so, but my energy definitely fluctuates throughout the weeks. And so, I'm kind of stronger during the weekend, after the weekend, like right after, and then I get that kind of midweek dip. I try not to. I do what I can to keep things on track. But I told myself I'm not going to let things go past like a week of slacking on anything. So I'm like, okay, like this weekend, starting Saturday night, I'm not really going to go out, and I'm going to just, get into some exercise, do some healthy eating starting tonight, take a break starting tonight. My break today started at 4:45 p.m. With the official time for the San Diego sunset, but I don't know. I mean, I was raised with a lot of things that I do kind of find beneficial for me. I do find it very beneficial for me to kind of take a break from the work week and just not work for a 24-hour period of time. I have no problem doing that. Especially when I get to spend time talking about this stuff or thinking about, what's going on in my mind that I haven't really had time to kind of think about and kind of recharge, and just know that I don't have any pressures coming up for the next day, probably next day and a half, in all honesty. I don't have anything that I actually have to do but relax and chill, and I can learn if I want to, but, and I probably will keep learning tonight, but, just because it's fun. But yeah, I think it's fun to challenge the way I think. The thing is, that's hard for me though with it is because it's stuff that I like to talk to people about, and I'm very kind of like sensitive to other people with like trying to like challenge them to a point where they're like upset, or like, I'm not trying to like make people feel bad or like feel superior or anything. I really just do this just similar to how people play video games or similar to how people watch television. It's entertaining for me. Like, I like it. I'd rather be like learning about random stuff about aliens or like whatever than, rewatching like reruns of Friends or something for the whole weekend. It's like, yeah, on occasion I will do, just veg out kind of thing, but it's like I don't feel like I get a whole lot of benefit from that unless I'm kind of like not well rested. So I like to be well rested. I like to relax. And that's what I'm attempting to do, today, is relaxing. And I just think it's interesting, just these different things about human lives. And the reason why it was kind of coming up for me was not just because I saw it, when I was flipping through some literature. I saw like one of the bold points was like Tree of Life, but I also, realized with that it kind of got me thinking about life in general, and how we live our lives. And I was kind of thinking about like just how I mentioned about the energy dips I get. Like, I've had some days where I've been surprisingly tired, which is really weird because I don't feel like I've had, like, in the past, I'd say I've had 2 majorly stressful days that both occurred on Saturdays, back-to-back Saturdays. So not this past Saturday, But before that was one Saturday, and the Saturday before that was one Saturday, and it was affecting me some days afterwards. And I did notice it was affecting me, but I don't think it's still affecting me. And it's also, this is like a time period of like my grandmother's, death anniversary. So this, and it just hit me kind of like yesterday or last night, and I was like, maybe that's contributing. I don't know. And I do eat occasional junk food, but it's not like more than what I normally eat. It's just like a normal, like I've had like a Thursday where I just, that's the day that I try to like record stuff late, and near like 7 p.m. when I start actually getting hungry for dinner. And then I've worked already from 8 to 4, and I've gone through most of the work week by that point, and I'm already pretty tired. So I kind of just eat whatever, just as like a cheat day, because I'm like, I'll work out if I feel like it on Thursday, but then I usually will eat whatever. And so that's what I did yesterday, but my energy was already dipped by Thursday, even before that, so it didn't really matter that it dipped more. I was like, whatever. But what I mean is like things that I've experienced, like coffee not giving me more energy necessarily, or more focus. And I do think I haven't been doing a lot of reflection too, so that does make my mind feel super cloudy. I haven't been doing a lot of meditation. That does make it so that I just kind of just get cloudy for sure. Unfocused. Just have that slow processing speed. But that's something that I do try to kind of improve on, because I don't really like it. But yeah, it's been interesting to note. And another thing that I kind of wanted to mention was how, when thinking about that, I was thinking about my, just kind of like how my energy levels can kind of relate to like levels of happiness for me. Now, I wouldn't say this week was unhappy. I haven't really felt like depressed or unhappy or like low energy, yes, but not like low mood so much, or not really down. Just kind of more so, okay, it would be nice if my energy would like pick up, because dang, and I don't want to drink a bunch of coffee. There were a couple days this week sorry guys, somebody called me in the middle of recording and it shuts this off. But yeah, I was thinking about, our life, and, just, happiness and where that comes from. Like, I have had some days where I wasn't, like, happy, when I was super, like, stressed out, overly annoyed, just kind of like, oh my gosh. But I feel like usually I'm able to kind of handle that a little better, so I don't feel like it's too impacting. As far as the death anniversary, I don't feel like, I don't know if it's too impacting, but I haven't, like, yeah, this was like a while ago, like in 2018. So, I do feel healed from it. I don't feel like it's something that impacts me too much, but it is that time of year. I don't remember the exact day that she died, but I remember we did have Thanksgiving a few days after her death, and I wasn't planning on going to Thanksgiving during that time. I wasn't planning on going to the Midwest for Thanksgiving, because I couldn't afford it. And yeah, and I think my mom had already been in that state for like at least since September, maybe August. 'Cause I think that's the last time I talked to her was on her birthday, September 14th. Wishing her happy birthday. and I wasn't planning on going to Thanksgiving. Like, that was, I wasn't gonna plan to buy the ticket to go, because financially I didn't have it, and it wasn't something I'd been saving for or thinking of. But we ended up going for Thanksgiving because the funeral was like the same weekend. I believe the funeral was before, like on the Wednesday or Tuesday or something, and then Thanksgiving was afterwards. And that is the last time I've been to the Midwest too. But I did also enjoy seeing everybody. I did enjoy having a holiday with everybody that originally we wouldn't have all come together. And this was right before the pandemic. And I also lost an uncle, unfortunately, during the pandemic. So, like, I'm glad that I got to see him, even though it was for that funeral. But I don't think, I mean, I don't know if this is even mean to say, but I mean, when people are like a certain age, I mean, you want them to feel good, you want them to be happy and not in pain and not suffering. And I'm not saying that death is something that we're like happy for at all, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, if the health is deteriorating and, things just aren't working out, like, you kind of know, they're probably not going to be likely to live, like, till they're, like, 110 or something. It's kind of like, you can kind of see, okay, like, this countdown is getting a lot closer. Even if the year before, things didn't look like that at all. It's like, okay, like, you're getting more and more diagnoses in and out of the hospital, more and more severe things happening. And then, she had her second stroke by that time. So I don't know. I just find things like that just as part of the natural cycle of living, even though, yes, it's sad. And I wouldn't say that it's a pleasant situation, even if it was in the past and it wasn't like too long ago. But it is just something that I think we don't spend a lot of time thinking about, is death and life. And a lot of times we think about the future. A lot of the now is spent doing something towards the future. And whether or not we're enjoying what we're doing now, that determines kind of, I guess, the situation in person to person. But some people don't focus on enjoying what they're doing now too, so that's important to do. I do talk a lot at times elsewhere about like finance and things like that. And that's a big future related thing. Like, even if I'm making changes to things today or paying stuff off now or buying something now, that is all geared towards how the future is going to look. And kind of more predicting and planning and things like that. But I understand, with finance, we have to look at the future too. But I know that's a big part of what a lot of us spend our time doing, even if it's just working. That's still something related to finances. If you're getting paid, or if you're not even getting paid, that's still related. If you need to get paid and you're working and you're not getting paid, it's like you need to get paid. So a lot of us, we need to get paid to have a livelihood. And that's something that I do I always mention the Amish. I feel like I'm one of those people who just mentions the same thing all the time. But that's one thing that I do appreciate about Amish culture, is that they're able to live in the midst of our modern culture, and be self-sufficient. Now, like, I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're not really reliant necessarily all the time on money. And they do know how to work, and they do know how to feed themselves. Now, they're not all farmers, but they do have crafts that they do as by the time they're adults, or even younger. Like, they start learning young to do the work because, they're not in school usually after 8th grade. And so they're young when they start to work. And so they develop that very quickly. while their brains are still like sponges, and then they still are just improving on it because that's what they do for pretty much the rest of their lives, unless they change their career path, or I don't know what you want to call it, their trade, or if they don't have, if they don't stick within the religion, or if they leave for that period of like Rumspringa or something similar to that. But yeah, that's kind of just my thoughts for right now, and I don't really want to do too much more on this, but I just think it's just all interesting to me. So not sure what you guys think, but if you want to comment, go for it. And thanks for listening.